Welcome back to Worldview. Now, we've all been stuck in traffic jams. Some are a normal part of commuting to and from our place of work. Others are caused by an accident or other incident, and yet still others are caused by poor planning. So to celebrate this Earth Day week, I wanted to touch on the latter, poor planning. Now, here in Wales, we've seen some traffic schemes go horribly awry. A recent traffic light has resulted in 20 to 30-minute rush hour tailbacks, making the situation much worse. Even more so for those who commute via bicycle. Now, the general disdain and inconsideration for those riding on two wheels in the elements by those secure in their four-wheeled cabins is huge here in the United Kingdom. Bicycle riders share narrow roadways that, under the national speed limit, have a top speed of 60 miles per hour. That's 90 kilometers an hour. The same as we see on single-track rural farm roads. Frankly, it's a bit crazy. Now, here to talk with us about alternative schemes and what we can do to make all drivers of all vehicles and bicycles safe is Ian Perry. Now, he's an urban environmental engineer. Ian is a Cycling Forum Committee member of the CILT. That's the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and he's a member of the New Mobility Agenda. He's worked in marketing, traveled the world, and returned concerned about the environment and lifestyles and how we're governed, particularly how access and then mobility shapes how we live. Ian Price, welcome to Worldview.
Hi, Dennis.
Now, Ian, we met in a Facebook group talking about a rather notorious new traffic scheme and interchange here, and I was particularly struck by your photos of the gap between the pavements and the entrance to a then elevated and very narrow bike lane, and your subsequent writings made me want to have a conversation with you here, especially after having spent almost 6 years in bicycle-friendly the Netherlands. Why is it that planning for bicycles and other mobility challenge vehicles, such as the wheeled rascal scooters and motorized wheelchairs, is so substandard?
Well, there seems to be a sort of add-on, an optional extra that now comes in with regulations, and if the regulations aren't right, that's what you get, unfortunately. It's not at the heart of planning and thinking.
Well, why do you think local planning officials seem to have such difficulty doing what would essentially seem to be the right thing in this area?
They do what they know, and there's a very great lack of ambition, there's a lack of thinking, and the most important thing is to meet the regulations that are set from above. We've got no bottom-up processes. We're very much a top-down society, with the engineers dictating what we have rather than the people saying what we want and what we need. And that's the core of your problem.
Well, you were at a meeting last night discussing that interchange, and we only saw, I think you said there was something like 6 or 7 residents there at the meeting. That would seem to demonstrate, at least if I were a councillor sitting there, a lack of real interest other than a few very hardcore individuals. What do you do to sort of raise the awareness amongst the rest of the community?
I think people are aware, and many more people are active now on the likes of Facebook and Twitter. So people are interested. It's a case of last night, the physical problem of travelling to a school, which isn't perhaps local, and going there for 6 p.m. It needs to be completely changed around with the politicians and decision makers reaching out to the public. And Cardiff Council did a similar scheme, which was very well attended, but it was there in the heart of the city, and people could drop in while they were shopping. So it needs to be that democracy is brought to the people rather than people being asked to go to democracy, and that's where we need to start thinking.
Well, that's a very fair point. I mean, if you think in terms of, when elections are held, they're held during working hours. They're not held on weekends when people can actually be there. Yet I see so much apathy on the part of the electorate, other than when people are suddenly made aware of something. What would you suggest be done in that type of an area?
Well, I've lived in the Netherlands during the time of an election, and electioneering in the Netherlands was very different to the UK. They would have stalls on the market in the town on the Saturday. So when people were doing their shopping, there were the politicians canvassing for votes. In the UK, you may or may not get someone knock on your door, and you may or may not be there. And then you just have a one-on-one conversation, whereas the Dutch way of doing things is very much the politicians reach out to the people. They're there in an environment, shopping, and there are the politicians hustling, and it's very much more involved. The Dutch are very much more into citizen power, whereas we're much more into a top-down decision-making process, and maybe we'll be informed, or maybe we'll be consulted after the key decisions have been made. So we get involved too far down the line, whereas the Dutch are much more involved further up the line. In many cases, I'm sure it's not every case, but in many cases, and that's where we need to get to.
We're talking with Ian Price here on Worldview with Denis Campbell. Ian, you mentioned something very important. I spent almost 6 years of my life in the Netherlands before moving here to Wales, and you say you've also lived there. There, it's a completely different scheme, not just in terms of government, but also in terms of how bicycles and bicyclists are treated in that country. I've noticed that, for example, that even if you're involved in an accident with a bicycle, it's always your fault as the driver of the automobile, and you always have to give 100% deference. It's very different here. What can be done to change some of that here in the UK?
We need key people to start cycling. That's the most important thing, because they're taking decisions for us on something they don't understand. And that is a big problem. Yeah. And I do hear that people who are very keen on cycling are making these decisions, and they go cycling, but they're not cycling every day. They're not cycling to the shops. They're loading their bicycle onto their car and going to a park and coming back saying we like cycling. And it's very different doing that to going to university or to school or to your local shop by bicycle. And if you actually do that in the UK, it's very frightening. I don't think very many of us who have cycled have not had an incident where someone's raged at us, we felt threatened, and come close to being involved in an accident. Whereas in the Netherlands, you jump on a bike and you are totally safe. You feel safe. Maybe you're not as safe as you feel, but you feel safe. Nobody wears a helmet. You sit up on the bike, so you're pretty safe. If something goes wrong with your bicycle, there are other people there to help you. It's an entirely different system over there. There's nothing at all in common. This said, we could get there, but it will take a little bit of determination. It will take a bit of joined up thinking, joined up infrastructure, perhaps different bicycles, because a Dutch bicycle, not only does it sit up and beg, you also have panniers for your luggage, whereas the UK bicycle is often maybe cheaper, more expensive, but it's not actually what you need.
Yeah, I do understand that. I can remember loading a child on the handlebars, another in the seat behind me, riding into the village, buying a 2 or 3 days worth grocery shop and then riding back. It was absolutely nothing to really worry about or think about. It's just what you did.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a natural thing. You pick the Dutch bicycle up. The lights are normally attached to the bicycle. Whereas in the UK, you're expected to remember your lights. Now, if you set off at 12 midday and go for a nice cycle ride, you might not get home till after dark. Now, in the UK, you need to have remembered to take your lights with you. If not, the police will pull you over and not issue a £30 fine. Whereas in the Netherlands, it's quite simple. The bike lights are attached to the bicycles. You can't actually go without them. And often there's no battery to fail either. So it's simple little things like that. Everything's joined up. Everything's thought through. It's simple. They even have one-speed bikes, partly because it's very flat there, but partly because there's much less maintenance. So it's made as easy as possible in the Netherlands, whereas here we have extra suspension. We have all these little novelty things that we don't actually need, but we're missing the panniers that people actually need. So the bicycle industry needs to start looking at itself and saying, do we really want to sell the bikes we sold last year that aren't actually good for utility cycling, or do we want to sell bicycles that are going to make utility cycling easier, better, and therefore help to develop utility cycling in the UK?
Well, this is a fascinating subject, Ian, and I know a particular passion of yours also is traffic planning. You shared with me a video about Poynton, which is a little village just south of London, and some of their traffic difficulties. I'm going to have you back so we can talk a little bit about overall traffic planning and ways that sort of a scheme could work. But I want to thank you for joining us here on Worldview today.
Welcome. Nice to talk to you.
We've been speaking with Ian Perry. He's an urban environmental engineer and member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, as well as the New Mobility Agenda. Now, coming up next, Kaustubh Kulkarni joins us from Mumbai to discuss the horrific crimes being committed against young women and the government's and public's outcry and reaction. You're watching Worldview with Denis Campbell. Stay right here.